Donovan Clingan, UConn's legit 7'4" behemoth true center who's seen a pair of foot injuries derail what would be a pretty solid season. He suffered one in preseason and one just a few weeks ago, but should be making his return very, very soon. He was a consensus 4-star recruit, ranked number 37 per RSCI, so he was on radars prior to his freshman season with UConn, where he helped the Huskies win the national title and solid backup big minutes. He's been regarded as the top true center prospect in the 24 class for a while, and is right now averaging 13.9 points, 6.3 rebounds, and 2 blocks per game while shooting 63% overall and 53% from the free throw line. He'll be 20 years old on draft night. Here's how Heat Check works. I'm going to identify one draft prospect and grade them on what I believe to be the most generally important skills and aspects of their game: athleticism, scoring, defense, passing and playmaking, and overall feel for the game. After those 5, I'll grade one additional skill relative to that prospect that I think is going to have the biggest effect on their stock. That will be deemed the swing skill. Each skill will be graded on the Heat Check chart, with ranges from freezing all the way to scorching. When that's all said and done, I'll divvy out one final overall score. Let's start with his athleticism, where in terms of conventionality, he's obviously not great, so I've gone with a cool grade here so as not to give the wrong impression to people who might not watch further that Clingan is some bouncy high flyer. He's not. But in terms of 7'4" traditional centers, Clingan has some pretty exceptional movement overall. First off, he is absolutely massive. He reportedly measured 7'3" without shoes and is probably hovering somewhere in the vicinity of 280 pounds. His standing reach is likely a few inches shy of 10 feet. Clingan is just a genuinely massive individual. It's hard not to be lumbering at that size, but overall he does a pretty good job of mitigating that with good recognition, basketball IQ, and more. Of course, his foot speed is not going to be on the level of smaller guys, but he's not the slowest 7-footer you've ever seen. He's fairly coordinated for his size, albeit still growing in that department, and he uses it to his advantage, which we'll get to later. Again, overall a cool grade for pure athleticism, but in terms of size and tools, not something I'm necessarily worried about. Cool here won't really affect how I think of him as a player and shouldn't with you either. In terms of scoring, I've given Clingan a warm grade despite his very traditional style big man scoring package. Per Synergy, in his 12 games as a sophomore, Clingan ranks excellent on his points per shot rating, hitting on 71.4% of his at-rim attempts. And 27 points per game per 40 this season is certainly nothing to scoff at. He's at his most effective posting up in the paint, utilizing his premier size and strength to give himself advantages that typically lead to powerful dunks or lays. Clingan is solid at finishing through contact, and to this point I'd say he leans about 70-30 on the power skill spectrum, although his skill around the rim and even away from it is an ever-developing trait. He doesn't have an unlimited arsenal of post moves due to that limited mobility, but he's getting better each game at establishing his position within the paint, and while NBA bigs are going to be a testy jump, he's so gargantuan that he'll have a decent advantage in plenty of matchups. At his size, he's a completely immovable object when he's allowed to successfully seal himself off. In the pick and roll, he's far from a perfect prospect, but he disrupts defense setting screens with his titanic frame, and he's getting a better feel as the roll man as he plays more. Per Synergy, he ranks excellent in post-ups, good as a cutter and on putbacks, and very good as a PNR roll man. He's only attempted 6 shots outside the paint so far, hitting on only 1 of those, and to this point in his career, that's essentially a non-factor. He's certainly more of a half-court threat, with not enough real juice to get out and go in transition. Still, his paint supremacy and magnitude alone are things we've seen translate to the NBA in certain schemes and lineups, so it makes him a viable offensive play. Defense is where Clingan is going to hang his hat, and for my money is well worthy of a scorching grade, with a small caveat. Averaging just shy of 4 blocks per 40 this season, 5.5 in his freshman season, he's one of the best rim protectors and shot blockers in all of college basketball. Simply put, he's an Empyrean presence when in the paint. The same laws of physics apply on this end. He's not as mobile as some of the recent 7-foot shot blockers to enter the league of late, but his size allows him to envelop near everything around the rim, erasing or altering shot after shot when he's in the zone. And Clingan's technique is more refined than most guys his size. He's a decent tracker of the ball when hunting a block. He fouls less than twice a game. He's typically pretty good about staying straight up. And despite his prowess as a pure shot swatter, some of his best work is done in drop coverage, an obviously massive skill in the ISO and pick and roll heavy NBA. Beating the dead horse here, lots of work is done by his size, but his footwork in these situations far outweighs that of his lumbering peers. He stays laser focused, shows discipline, and seems to key in on keeping his feet active. Of course, Clingan is not a perfect defensive prospect. His help defense needs work, and he's prone to some ugly fouls. He's not a guy you can really just throw into any system with immediate success, but for teams willing to make him a centrifugal drop big piece, there's little doubt in my mind he can be effective. I'm going to touch on his rebounding in this section, an obvious skill of his at 7'4". He averages 6.1 rebounds in his 21 minutes per game, which rounds out to about 12 per 40. As an aside, last season it was over 17 per 40. That could be due to the limited sample thing going on this year. Regardless, he's not some one-of-one rebounder, but likely a very good average positionally. That could be a slight touch point developmentally for him, not something I'm too worried about. Again, his concreteness when stationary can be a real asset, especially when he's in position near the basket for putbacks or defensive rebounds. In terms of his passing and playmaking, Clingan is above average as a traditional big. He's not necessarily going to wow you on a nightly basis or put up gaudy assist numbers, but he can make the simple stuff even on the perimeter. He takes care of the ball, and he's shown flashes of really advanced stuff, earning him a warm grade in this department. As the film shows, he's able to be reactive with the ball in hands, which is not often said for 7-foot+ paint presence guys. Obviously, a big portion of his assists are going to be dribble handoffs, but he's shown the ability to hit cutters, an important NBA skill, and there's been some flashes of short roll playmaking that are really promising and kind of line up with his general feel for basketball. So in summation, not an adept passer playmaker obviously, but above average positionally and something to feel good about regarding his potential. Clingan's unquantifiable feel for the game has earned him a warm grade. Similar to the passing and even scoring, in the grand scheme of all basketball players, his air quotes feel is not going to stand out. But at a colossal 7'4", his ability to have options on the offensive end, mixed with his clear basketball IQ on the defensive end, does. It shines through the most in his unteachable defensive prowess, whether it's perfectly tracking a ball mid-flight or locking down multiple players at once. Just in the tape, you can tell he has a little more feel than many in his archetype, thus the warm grade. On to the swing skill. With shooting likely never being a factor in this case, or at least not anytime soon, I've decided to go with general playability as Clingan's swing skill. If you're going to be spending a potential lottery pick on a player, you have to know that they're going to be playable often and in a variety of situations. On one hand, the slow, drop-big archetype is a bit of a dying breed in the modern NBA. A lot of teams thrive on pure versatility, employing a 5-out style, heavy driving, iso ball, and three-point shooting that simply doesn't call for planting someone in the paint the way Clingan might. But on the other side of that coin, Clingan is essentially as good as it gets in terms of modern prospects of this archetype. Good movement, massive defensive impact, and a decent enough combination of size and skill to produce on offense. For now, I've given him a cool grade for playability. I think just generally in the NBA right now, Clingan isn't necessarily a commodity, but he's A, going to be really good with a select few teams, and B, even in a lesser role or spot minutes, he's going to be capable of dominance. And improving his late game impact by limiting bad fouls, increasing his 50% free throw conversion, and more would make him a must-play kind of guy. So take this cool grade with a grain of salt. He's not going to be for every team or scheme, but for teams willing to plug him in and lean on him to anchor the paint, I think he offers a pretty high floor. The grade. I've given Donovan Clingan a grade of 7.7, which is probably going to land him safely in my 2024 lottery, likely anywhere from picks 10 through 14. I personally don't value Clingan's archetype much in the modern NBA, but in summation, as a prospect, he's shown a ton of promise as a potential high-impact big and analytics darling with blue-collar offense, high-level defense, some touch here, feel there, and his size alone could create problems for teams at any level of basketball globally. I'm positive more than a few NBA teams are going to value him as a lottery pick in the 2024 NBA draft due to his high floor and room for growth, but his range could be wide due to those positional limitations. As with most in this class, we're likely going to have to wait for the 2024 lottery to feel out potential landing spots. Regardless, Clingan is probably a long-time rotational big in the NBA, worthy of a pick if you plan on giving him the time of day. That is it for this one. Let me know what you think of Donovan Clingan, what you grade him, where you draft him, and drop who you want to see in the next heat check. I'm excited to be back. We'll see you next time.